My younger brother declared. Your daughter isn't important enough to be invited to my child's elementary school graduation party. Luna's eyes filled with tears. I looked at the whole family, then at my child. I took out my phone, stood up, and what I said later wiped the smiles off everyone's faces. My name is Vivian, and I thought I had grown completely immune to the gravitational pull of my family's drama. For 38 years, I had perfected the art of being the responsible one, the high-powered venture capitalist who secretly tolerated being the family doormat in exchange for peace. I was excellent at my job, financially independent, and fierce about protecting my 12-year-old daughter, Luna. But when it came to my family, I always managed to find a way to swallow whatever bitter pill they offered, telling myself that maintaining the illusion of unity was worth more than my own emotional needs. That illusion shattered completely on a Monday night, right as I was wiping down the kitchen island, after a quiet dinner with Luna. She had already retreated to her room, leaving the house silent, except for the gentle hum of the refrigerator. Then, the phone rang. The name, Jason, flashed on the screen. My younger brother, the golden boy, the perpetually struggling tech startup founder who, despite needing my help more than he knew, always managed to treat me like a minor annoyance. I answered, expecting the usual frantic request for advice or a loan. He didn't waste time on pleasantries. Vivian, listen, Cole's elementary graduation party is going to be huge. The biggest thing we've done all year. I smiled, leaning against the cold marble counter. I could already picture his 11-year-old son, Cole, enjoying the spotlight. That's wonderful, Jason. I'm so happy for him. He rattled off a list of details. They had booked the entire golf course country club ballroom. There would be a live band, and even a drone photographer. I waited for the invitation, ready to politely accept, perhaps suggesting Luna could miss her Tuesday swimming practice. The words never came. Instead, his voice dropped, turning sharp and cold, like scraping a knife across ceramic. Just so we're clear, you can come if you want. But Luna, leave her home. She's not important enough to be part of Cole's big day. The sound of his voice speaking those words hit me with a physical force that made me gasp. I wasn't just surprised, I was physically frozen, my mind utterly unable to process the cruelty. He spoke the sentence with the casualness of stating the weather, delivering a devastating judgment on his own niece, as if she were a piece of furniture that clashed with the decor. My internal conflict was sharp and immediate. The old Vivian, the one who always kept the peace, wanted to laugh it off, blame his stress, or make an excuse for him. But the protector in me, the one dedicated to Luna, had already taken over. I felt a violent, internal shock, like a system overloaded and crashing. My heart pounded so hard in my chest that my ribs ached. I managed to speak, my voice sounding foreign and distant. Did you really just say that about my child? Your niece? Jason emitted a short, sharp laugh, a sound full of ego and zero remorse. It's Cole's moment, Vivian. Don't make it weird. And with that, he disconnected the line. The phone screen went dark, and the silence in the kitchen felt oppressive. I stood there, still leaning on the counter, holding the dead phone like a grenade I'd just failed to defuse. It was in that moment of absolute stillness and cold shock that my tolerance snapped. That entire dysfunctional dynamic, the prioritizing of Jason's ego, the disregard for my feelings, and now, the outright cruelty directed at my daughter, collapsed. There would be no more swallowing. There would be no more compromise. The emotional shift was irreversible. The old, emotionally guarded Vivian, who avoided confrontation, was gone, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. Someone had to pay for those words, and it certainly would not be my daughter. I found my feet moving silently across the floor to the living room. Luna's backpack was still slumped by the sofa. I picked up my phone again, my hands trembling slightly, but my focus clear. I bypassed the address book and the group chat, where I knew the inevitable performance would begin. I composed the shortest message I could manage, addressed only to Jason. "We won't be coming." I pressed send without rereading the sentence. It was a refusal of the invitation, but it was also a rejection of the entire toxic dynamic he represented. The act felt like drawing a line in the sand, a line that, once crossed, could never be undone. The conflict had been escalated, and the battle lines were drawn. I locked the screen and waited, knowing the silence would not last. I barely had time to lock the screen after sending the message to Jason when the house lights seemed to dim, signaling the inevitable. Mother's name, Eleanor, was already lighting up my phone. I took a slow, deep breath that felt like preparing for a difficult dive. I needed to focus on the cold resolve I had just found, not the guilt she was about to manufacture. I put the call on speakerphone immediately. I knew, based on decades of experience, that I would not be repeating a single word of this confrontation later. Vivian Marie Griffin, the full name. The tone of severe disappointment she reserved for times when I had dared to deviate from her carefully orchestrated script of family harmony. Jason says, "You are making a scene over a children's party." Luna had wandered in from the kitchen, her homework forgotten. She stopped short, her eyes wide, and recognized the tension instantly. She said nothing, but her fingers found the sleeve of my hoodie and began twisting the cotton fabric until the material stretched white under her knuckles. I covered her small hand with mine, a silent promise of solidarity. "He told my daughter she isn't important enough to attend, Mom," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any emotional color that she could latch onto. "That is the scene," Eleanor huffed, a theatrical noise of impatience. "Oh, please." He is excited. "Cole is the youngest grandchild, Vivian. You know how your brother gets when it's about his kid. Don't turn this into World War II over a few words." The casual dismissal of Jason's cruelty was the real knife. Eleanor always chose the path of least resistance, which meant protecting the louder, needier Jason and demanding that I, the oldest and most capable, simply understand. I felt Luna's grip tighten, and I squeezed back. "I'm not turning anything into anything," I replied. "I'm keeping my daughter away from people who think she is disposable." "You were always the sensitive one," she sighed. "Let it go, Vivian. For family." She hung up before I could construct a response. Having delivered her verdict, and retreated back into her comfort zone of deliberate ignorance. 30 seconds later, the family group chat exploded. The screen looked like a strobe light flashing with notification banners. Bridget, my cousin, was the first to weigh in, of course. Boycotting a 5th grade graduation party. Real mature, Vivian. Her message read, instantly followed by another. Jason says Cole has been looking forward to this for months. Stop being petty. They had already gone to work. Jason had successfully flipped the script, presenting my refusal as a tantrum, rather than a righteous reaction to an injury. I stared at the stream of incoming texts. They were demanding that I ignore the fact that their golden boy had publicly branded my child as valueless. Another cousin posted the eye roll emoji. Then, someone I barely knew dropped a gif of a toddler throwing a tantrum. The most telling contribution was the complete silence from my father. That silence, the quiet acceptance of injustice, was louder than all the toxic texts combined. Luna leaned her head against my shoulder and watched the messages scroll down the screen. They were stacking up too fast to read, but she understood the overall message. They think I didn't want to go, she whispered. Her voice was small and cracked, right down the middle with unshed tears. I gently turned the phone face down on the sofa cushion. They believe whatever's easiest, baby. She didn't move away, but her shoulders started a silent, shaky tremor. I don't even like country clubs. She tried to rationalize, her internal conflict laid bare. She was desperately trying to justify the family's cruelty by convincing herself the event wasn't worth attending anyway. I reached out and muted every single notification on my phone, and then turned the ringer off entirely. The noise of the conflict ceased abruptly, leaving a sudden, profound silence in the room. It was the kind of quiet that pressed against your eardrums, a complete withdrawal from the manufactured chaos. We stayed that way for a long time. Luna just breathed fast and shallow against my side, wearing herself out with the emotional weight of their betrayal. Eventually, she curled tighter and whispered the question that was at the heart of the matter. Do they love Cole more than me? I swallowed the rock of emotion in my throat. Some people love loud, sweetheart. It doesn't make it real love. And it certainly doesn't make you worth less. It was the only truth I could offer. She didn't answer, just clutched my sleeve. I looked at the black, quiet screen of my phone, now useless to the screaming family. Luna eventually drifted into a shallow sleep, still clutching my arm like a lifeline. The phone, which had just delivered the family's brutal consensus, was now an inert object. I knew this was just the beginning. The emotional siege was over for now. But the public, formal validation of Jason's cruelty was still coming. I waited for it with a grim and settled resolve. A week went by in a suspended state of tension. I kept my phone muted, ignoring the dozens of messages and voicemails from Eleanor and Bridget, trying to demand my obedience. The silence in the house, however, was not peaceful. It was sharp and clear, the kind of quiet that follows a deep cut, when you are simply waiting for the inevitable bleeding to start. It was Thursday evening. I was folding a pile of Luna's clothes in the living room when the doorbell rang. A courier stood on my porch, impeccable, in a navy blazer. He was holding a thick, cream-colored envelope, sealed with actual gold wax. The country club's logo, a sweeping C and G intertwined, was embossed in the corner. My name, Ms. Vivian Griffin, was printed in elegant, raised lettering. Nothing else. No +1. Certainly no, and Luna. I signed for it, the paper feeling heavy and cold under my fingertips. I thanked the courier, closed the door, and walked straight to the kitchen. I placed the invitation on the marble island, handling it as if it were something dangerous that might contaminate the room. It was the physical manifestation of the verbal insult Jason had delivered. 5 minutes later, Luna walked in. Her hair was still damp from the shower, and she was wearing the soft gray hoodie she favored. She spotted the ornate envelope immediately. It was impossible to miss, glowing under the kitchen lights. "That's the invitation, right?" she asked. She tried to sound merely curious. But there was a faint, wavering hope beneath the question, a desperate, 12-year-old wish that perhaps the family had realized their mistake and included her name on the physical card. I nodded. She picked it up, her thumb tracing the smooth, unbroken gold wax seal. She carefully peeled the seal back and withdrew the heavy stock card. It had a navy blue border, with the event details rendered in gold foil lettering. Luna read it once, then again, slowly. Her eyes were fixed on the line that detailed the recipient, or rather, the singular recipient. She set the card down exactly where it had been, perfectly aligned on the island. "Just you," she said. Her voice was flat, eyes fixed on the marble countertop beneath the card, avoiding mine. I stayed silent. There was nothing I could add that would soften the impact of that final, formal rejection. The family had doubled down on the insult, making sure it was delivered not just verbally, but through expensive stationery. Luna barely touched her dinner that night. Afterward, she disappeared to the sofa, pulling a blanket up to her chin and scrolling on her phone. I was loading the dishwasher, the clatter of the plates sounding abnormally loud, when I heard her sharp, involuntary inhale. It was a small, wounded sound. I dried my hands and walked over. "What is it?" She turned the phone screen toward me without a word. Jason's son, Cole, had launched a full Instagram story takeover, a massive digital advertisement for his worth and the party's extravagance. Slide 1. Cole standing under the country club's stone archway, in a tailored navy blazer. Caption: Graduation weekend loading. Slide 2. Drone footage of the clubhouse at golden hour, fairy lights twinkling across the patio. Text overlay: "This is going to be legendary." Slide 3. A close-up of the gift table, already overflowing with boxes from luxury stores, including a shiny new gaming laptop, half unwrapped. Slide 4. Cole and 6 friends, all in matching sunglasses, arms slung around shoulders. Caption: "My people. Best squad ever." Slide 5. A video of Sierra, Jason's wife, filming Cole walking the practice stage while parents clapped. Caption: "Our baby is all grown up. So proud." Luna's thumb stopped on the final slide. It showed Cole grinning next to a life-size cardboard cutout of himself in a cap and gown. The caption read: "Thank you to everyone who's part of making this the biggest day of my life." She lowered the phone slowly, her eyes on the blank screen. "I guess I'm not part of it," she said, so quietly that I almost missed the words. I reached for her shoulder, but she shifted away just enough to protect the small space of her personal humiliation. "Mom," she whispered, still staring at the phone. What did I ever do to them? The question wasn't loud or angry. It was small, broken, and delivered with a genuine lack of comprehension. It hit me like a fist to the chest, wiping away the cold resolve and replacing it with pure, burning devastation for her pain. "Nothing," I managed, my voice cracking on the single word. She gave the tiniest shrug, the weight of the realization settling on her shoulders. I'm almost 13. I know how this works. If you're not invited, it's because they don't want you there. Every comforting lie I had ever told her about unconditional family love flashed through my mind and died. She stood up, the blanket slipping to the floor. I've got a history project due tomorrow. She walked to her room and closed the door with the softest click I had ever heard. It was not a slam of anger, but the quiet seal of a 12-year-old choosing isolation over enduring more pain. I stayed on the couch, staring at the gold, sealed envelope on the kitchen island. It glowed under the recessed lighting, like some kind of final, undeniable verdict. Hours later, I checked on her. She was asleep atop the covers, her phone clutched in her hand, the screen dead. Cole's triumphant stories had played on loop until the battery gave out. I gently took the phone and set it on her nightstand. Standing in her doorway, watching her breathe, I thought of every empty promise I had ever made about the meaning of blood. It was all lies. I walked back to the kitchen, picked up the invitation, and turned it over in my hands. Luna's name wasn't on it, and that was the moment something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic, but a clean, quiet break. I was done pretending this was okay. The clean, quiet break I felt was not the end of my anger, but the beginning of my clarity. I was done pretending this was okay. The time for tears and quiet suffering was over. The time for action was here. Action that defined who we were to each other, permanently. Saturday arrived, the day of Cole's lavish graduation party. The weather was perfect for an outdoor event at a country club, sunny and warm. Exactly the kind of day Jason would have bragged about coordinating. I woke Luna before 7 o'clock, gently pulling back her curtain to let the morning light spill into her room. She blinked awake, her face marked by sleep, but without the usual weight of dread that had shadowed her all week. "Morning, sleepyhead," I said. "Change into your swimsuit. We have a big day planned." "Swimsuit?" she asked, confused. She looked at the clock, then at me. "But aren't we supposed to be getting ready for Mom's dinner tonight?" "Yes," I confirmed. "But first, we're making our own memories." I had been planning this trip for days. The moment I realized I had to offer her a tangible narrative to the family's betrayal. I packed our bags quickly, 2 swimsuits, a tube of sunscreen, goggles, and a cooler packed with soda, and every sugary snack I usually restricted. I left the gold, sealed envelope lying on the kitchen island, a silent marker of what we were deliberately choosing to miss. I drove us 2 hours north, away from the city, away from the country club, and straight to the giant indoor water park she had been begging to visit for months. The moment we walked in, the air hit us. Thick, warm, and smelling powerfully of chlorine and popcorn. The glass roof filtered the midday sun, making the entire massive structure gleam. It was loud, messy, and wonderfully chaotic, the antithesis of Jason's perfectly manicured, exclusive country club event. We spent the entire day focused solely on joy. For 9 straight hours, Luna was just a kid again. Not a rejected niece struggling with her worth. We screamed until our voices were hoarse on the tallest slides, the water spraying up so high it hit the glass ceiling. We raced each other in the wave pool until our arms ached. We spent an hour floating the lazy river, bumping gently against strangers, discussing nothing more serious than the merits of various soft-serve toppings. We ate terrible, greasy nachos that tasted fantastic and soft, serve ice cream cones that melted faster than we could possibly lick them. There were no phones, no invitations, no hurt feelings, and certainly no family drama. Just water, sunshine filtered through the glass roof, and the two of us. I watched her, really watched her, and saw the anxiety lines around her eyes smooth out. By late afternoon, we were both pink, shouldered, chlorine, scented, and perfectly, completely happy. The drive back was quiet. Luna fell asleep almost instantly, curled against the passenger window. Her hair was still dripping slightly, her mouth was slightly open, and one hand was curled loosely on her lap, the residual tension completely gone. She had received a powerful dose of love, validation, and fun, proving to her, without a single lie, that her mother's priority was entirely her. It was nearly 8:30 in the evening when we pulled into Eleanor's long driveway. The monthly family dinner was always held on the last Saturday of the month, and only death could excuse attendance. The porch lights blazed bright, an artificial beacon of forced cheer. Cars were lined up and down both sides of the street. And there it was, front and center, parked like a monarch's carriage, Jason's brand new, white Range Rover. I cut the engine. The only sounds were the distant chirp of crickets and Luna's soft, even breathing. I touched her shoulder gently. "Hey, sleepy. We're here." She blinked awake, rubbing her eyes, her damp hair plastered to one cheek. She seemed to instantly recall the previous week's conflict. "Do we have to stay long?" she mumbled. "Just long enough to eat, be polite, and then leave," I promised. I looked at the house, a monument to the flawed family structure I grew up in. The temporary peace of the water park vanished, replaced by a cold, clear resolve. I wasn't just walking into a dinner. I was walking into a war zone, but this time, I was armored. And my sole objective was to protect the child next to me. I helped her out of the car. We were both wearing the wrong clothes. Casual jeans and t-shirts, smelling of chlorine, while I knew the rest of the family would be in their finest. Country club, casual. I squeezed her hand and walked toward the kitchen door, ready to face the music. I knew that by skipping Cole's grand event, the family would be primed for passive aggression. I was ready to absorb it, to turn their malice into the final proof I needed before executing my plan. We were here, only to witness the final insult. We walked in through the kitchen door, which opened straight into the brightly lit dining room. The sight was exactly as I had pictured. The long mahogany table was already full, set with the finest china Eleanor owned. The atmosphere was thick with leftover celebration, wine, and the smell of roasting chicken. Eleanor stood at the head of the table, ladling gravy. My father, carving the roast at the far end, gave me a weary, silent nod that conveyed decades of exhaustion with our family dynamic. Bridget, Jason's primary defender, had claimed the seat closest to the wine bottle and looked distinctly tipsy. Sierra, Jason's wife, wore a new emerald silk dress that practically shimmered, clearly still basking in the glow of the party's success. And there was Cole, still sporting his little graduation medal, clipped crookedly to the lapel of his expensive blazer. Jason sat right in the center of it all. His arms spread across the backs of two chairs, a triumphant, arrogant grin fixed on his face. Looking every bit like he had just been crowned king of the universe. Every single head turned the moment Luna and I stepped across the threshold, and the buzzing conversation instantly dropped to a low hum. "Well, look who finally showed up," Eleanor called, waving a serving spoon dripping with gravy. "We saved you 2 spots right here." Luna hesitated, half a step behind me, her chlorine-scented hair a stark contrast to the formal elegance of the room. I gave her hand a reassuring squeeze and led her to the empty chairs Eleanor had pointed out. Cole, still riding his sugar high, bounced in his seat. "Luna, they gave me a real medal. Look." Bridget smirked over the rim of her wine glass. "Yeah, where were you guys all day?" "The party was insane. We missed you girls." The last 3 words were delivered with a mocking lilt. Jason tilted his head, performing a masterful show of fake concern. "Vivian said Luna had a stomach bug. You look pretty energetic now." The lie was delivered smoothly, designed to protect his image as a caring family man while simultaneously trapping us. If I contradicted him, I was ruining the mood. If I agreed, I was lying to cover up my pettiness. Luna's fingers went ice cold in mine. She recognized the trap instantly. Eleanor slid 2 steaming plates of food in front of us. "Sit. Eat. Cole was the star today. Tell her about the Sunday bar." Cole didn't need prompting. He launched into a lengthy, detailed monologue about the 20 toppings, the confetti cannons, the professional photographer who followed him around half the afternoon, the drone flying overhead, and the special shout-out he got from the principal. It was a relentless cascade of manufactured importance. Luna stared at her untouched mashed potatoes, as if they held the secrets of the universe, completely ignoring Cole's stream of self-praise. Sierra leaned forward, all sugar and silk, her voice dripping with insincere sympathy. "We really missed you girls. Big days are better when the whole family's together." Then came the punch. Bridget snorted loud enough for the neighbors to hear. Some people just can't handle not being the center of attention for once. My father cleared his throat, the same wary mourning sound he had used for 30 years, the silent signal that the conversation was inappropriate. But no one even glanced his way. Jason chuckled, the sound grating. "Come on, guys. Vivian decided all the excitement would be too much for Luna. Right?" He delivered the question like the perfect punchline. It was a public performance, a demand for family alignment, and a final, definitive humiliation of my daughter. The entire table laughed. Eleanor, Bridget, Sierra, and even my father cracked a reluctant, complicit smile. Luna's fork slipped from her numb fingers and clattered loudly against the plate, the sound piercing the laughter. Eleanor frowned at the noise. "You okay, honey?" Luna's face flushed a dark, painful red. She opened her mouth, but the only sound that came out was a tiny, broken gasp. Cole, still buzzing on leftover attention, kept going, oblivious to the destruction he was witnessing. "They had a photographer following me the whole time." That was the last straw. Luna shoved her chair back, so hard it screeched across the hardwood floor, a terrible sound of violence in the quiet room. She stood, her eyes already spilling over with tears, and bolted. She didn't head for the front door. She ran through the kitchen, past the refrigerator, covered in 30 years of family photos, and out the side door onto the porch. The screen door slammed behind her with a sound like a gunshot. The dining room went dead silent again. The silence was thick and accusatory. Bridget rolled her eyes, instantly dismissing the trauma she had just witnessed. "Drama queen," she muttered into her wine glass. Eleanor reached toward Luna's empty chair, a flicker of concern finally crossing her face. "Vivian." I rose slowly. Every eye in the room, now sobered and waiting, was locked on me. Jason smirked into his wine glass, assuming my departure was imminent. "Kids. Huh. So sensitive." I looked around the table. At every adult who had just watched a 12-year-old girl flee in tears, and whose immediate response was to find a way to laugh about it or call her dramatic. I looked at Luna's empty chair, at the fork lying sideways in the mashed potatoes, at the food going cold. Something inside me snapped clean in half. It was the absolute, final, clean break I had felt days ago, but this time, it was public, witnessed, and irreversible. I stood there, feeling the weight of the entire room, and felt a cold, deliberate peace. They would never make her feel small again. They had just given me the final, unassailable proof I needed to justify the nuclear option. My hand was already in my pocket, closing around my phone. Watching my daughter disappear through that side door. The sound of the slamming screen door, still vibrating in the air. I stood up slowly from the dining table. The room was perfectly, unnaturally silent. Every fork was frozen halfway to its corresponding mouth. Every wine glass hovered. The only sounds were the slow, rhythmic tick of Eleanor's antique wall clock and the faint, muffled sound of Luna's quick footsteps on the wooden porch boards outside. My hand was shaking, not with fear, but with the profound, cold certainty of my impending action. My voice, however, came out like stainless steel, perfectly steady and entirely devoid of emotion. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I did not scroll through my contacts. I had already known who I was calling the moment Jason delivered his little punchline. I found the contact saved simply as J. Chen VC. James Chen. He was my lead partner, the only person with the authority to derail Jason's financing. I pressed call and immediately engaged the speakerphone. The entire dining table leaned forward as one, their faces registering confusion and growing dread. They recognized the seriousness of my posture, if not the person I was calling. The phone rang once. A calm, professional voice answered, utterly familiar. "Vivian." "James," I said. My voice was loud and clear, deliberately so that the phone's tiny speaker could carry every single word into the dead silence of the room. The Series A, with Jason Harrison. Kill it right now. Jason, who had been lazily sipping his wine, jerked upright. His chair crashed backward as he shot to his feet, sending a water glass tumbling to the floor. "Vivian, what the hell are you doing?" he stammered. His face had already lost all color, the smug grin wiped away by sudden, blinding panic. James didn't miss a beat. His response was professional and efficient. The response of a man who deals with millions of dollars and catastrophic withdrawals daily. Reason. I locked eyes with Jason. His denial and manipulation were over. This was a consequence he could not joke away, gaslight, or blame on someone else. Because the founder just proved in front of our entire family that he believes my 12-year-old daughter is worthless. I stated, my voice ringing with finality. I will not put $5 million behind someone who treats my child like garbage. Jason stumbled back, leaning heavily on the table for support. Vivian, you're lying. You can't be serious. What money? James ignored Jason's raw disbelief. Termination letter goes out in 60 seconds, he confirmed. Marquee lead investor withdrawal. Irreconcilable conflict of values. Anything else? That's all, I said, and ended the call. The effect was instantaneous and absolute. The dining room detonated. Jason lunged across the table, knocking over a gravy boat and smashing a bread plate. "Call him back right now," he screamed, his voice high and sharp with pure panic. Sierra, his wife, sprang up, screaming at a pitch that hurt my ears. "That money is Cole's future." "That's everything." Bridget's wine glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the hardwood floor, the crimson liquid spreading like a wound.
"You're insane."
"You ruined him over a party." Eleanor started sobbing into her napkin, her composure completely gone. "Vivian, please! He's your brother! You're destroying your family." My father slammed both palms on the table, so hard the plates jumped again. "Vivian Griffin. You get that man back on the phone this instant." I didn't move an inch. I stood perfectly still amidst the chaos, my gaze sweeping across their horrified faces. I had spent 2 years of my life maintaining my silence, and now they would hear the truth. "For 2 years," I said, my voice steady, cutting through the rising tide of screams and sobs. "I have been the anonymous lead investor in Jason's Series A round." The sheer audacity of the revelation silenced them, if only for a fraction of a second. I demanded my name stay off every cap table, every pitch deck, and every single email. I continued, reciting the facts in the tone of a board meeting, so no one could ever accuse me of giving family a free ride. I was scheduled to sign the term sheet next Thursday. Jason made a strangled, gargling sound of denial. "You're lying. You kept this secret for 2 years just to pull the rug out now." "Check your inbox," I suggested, flatly. James just blind copied me on the termination. 4 investors have already replied out in the last 45 seconds. They follow the lead. Sierra collapsed back into her chair, looking as if someone had cut her strings, the emerald dress now a meaningless scrap of silk. Cole stood bewildered in the doorway, his graduation medal still pinned crookedly to his blazer, ignored by the panicked adults. "I kept it secret so you could earn it on merit," I finished, locking eyes with Jason, who was slumped over the table, his earlier triumph now reduced to ashes. "You proved tonight you never deserved a single cent. Not when the cost was your own niece's dignity." Bridget's voice was a cracked whisper. "This is financial murder over a graduation party." "No," I replied, my voice hard and cold. "It's consequences for telling my daughter she doesn't belong." The moment was complete. The retribution was delivered. The family would now face the true price of their collective failure of compassion. Eleanor reached for me, her tears streaming down her cheeks, ruining her makeup. "Vivian, call him back. We will fix everything, please." I looked at the woman who raised me, the one who had spent decades prioritizing the fragile ego of her golden son over the moral truth. I felt nothing but ice. No anger, no pity, just a profound, empty coldness. "You had the chance to fix this the second she ran out crying," I said, my gaze steady on her weeping face. "You laughed with him instead." Jason, having realized his position was utterly lost, dropped to his knees right there on the dining room floor, between the roast chicken platter and the upturned gravy boat. The dramatic shift from arrogant founder to pleading beggar was complete. Vivian, he rasped, hands clasped in front of him in a grotesque parody of prayer. I'm begging you. His voice broke on the last word, dissolving into a raw, ugly sound. I looked down at my little brother, Jason, on his knees in front of everyone. He was reduced to nothing, exposed as a hollow fraud in front of the very people he had spent his life trying to impress. Every relative in the room, Eleanor, Bridget, my father, had spent their lives telling me, the responsible one, to let Jason win, to make things easy for him, to forgive his transgressions. I waited. His panic was so absolute that he never once glanced toward the side door, toward the porch where his niece, Luna, sat crying. He couldn't spare a single thought for her. That was all the answer I needed. That was the final proof of the irreparable conflict of values. I took one deliberate step back from the table. Jason's voice turned raw and furious, cracking with desperation. You are killing everything I've built. You are destroying us. Ueo aagilard. Yurteter ezen mpianti oghtobinvattmy keda elementar schol giardi atiom perwy. My deu tars es fili diriti tiars. Muhalfam ly, teen atmy kyle d. It oak oumy pishanisto d up and mohat is adypdh smeles of ever unes facies. I repeated the words, my voice cold steel against his sobs. You killed this family the moment you decided my daughter wasn't important enough for your son's big day. I turned my back on the catastrophic scene. I walked out of the dining room, past the spilled wine, the scattered shards of glass, and past every wide-eyed, horrified face that had suddenly realized the true price of choosing sides. Their silence was now a confession. I found Luna exactly where I knew she would be. She was curled on the top porch step, her arms wrapped around her knees, crying so hard her whole body shook with the effort. I sat down next to her and pulled her into my lap, exactly as I used to when she was small enough to carry. I wrapped my arms around her tight and held her while the shouting started inside. Jason's voice was the loudest, a ragged, animal sound of betrayal. Eleanor's sobs were high, pitched, and painful. Bridget was screaming my name, hysterical with disbelief. Luna whispered against my neck, her voice tiny and cracked, muffled by my sweater. Did you really just do that? I kissed the top of her wet hair. Yes, baby, I confirmed. And I would do it again 1,000 times. The porch light flickered overhead, casting long, wavering shadows across the front yard, and the Range Rover parked arrogantly in the driveway. The chaos inside was reaching a crescendo, muffled only slightly by the screen door. Someone started pounding on the wood, calling my name, demanding my return. I didn't turn around. I held Luna until her trembling began to subside, until her breath finally evened out into long, slow releases. The immediate violence of the moment was over. The future of Jason's company was already an artifact of the past, killed by a single phone call. What remained was the quiet aftermath, the necessary silence we had earned together. I felt an immense, overwhelming wave of peace wash over the exhaustion. My family had demanded I choose between their comfort and my daughter's worth. I had chosen Luna, and the price paid for that choice was now echoing in the screams behind the screen door. We were now separate, shielded by the consequence I had just enacted. I waited, holding my daughter, ready to face the backlash that would follow. but knowing the core victory was already ours. 2 days later, my phone started blowing up with a violence that made the previous week's group chat drama seem like a polite disagreement. I was standing in my kitchen, brewing coffee, when the first notification hit. Then another, then a flood. I glanced at the screen: 47 missed calls, 23 voicemails, and hundreds of texts, all from the same 4 people: Jason, Eleanor, Sierra, and Bridget. The subject line of the newest email stopped me cold, freezing my hand inches from the coffee maker. It was from James Chen. The subject read: Official termination, Harrison Technologies Series A. I opened it. The professional language offered a cold, clinical summary of the destruction I had unleashed. After careful consideration, and in direct response to the lead investor's withdrawal, Apex Ventures is formally terminating the Series A term sheet with Harrison Technologies, effective immediately. Primary reason: serious concerns regarding founder character and alignment with core family values of the partnership. Below the formal statement was a chain of forwarded replies from every other investor on the cap table. One by one, like silent, falling dominoes, they had confirmed their departure. Out. Pulling my commitment. Regretfully withdrawing. Effective immediately, we are out. The financial infrastructure of Jason's dream, the thing he valued above his own family, had vanished within hours, vaporized by a single boundary I drew. The phone rang again. Sierra's name. I let it go to voicemail, watching the screen until the red dot appeared. 30 seconds later, it rang again. Eleanor. FaceTime. I declined. Then, Bridget. A wall of text appeared, venomous and long. Vivian, you evil witch. Do you have any idea what you've done? Jason hasn't slept in 48 hours. His entire company is collapsing because of your temper tantrum. You're proud of yourself. Destroying your own brother over a stupid party. I hope you rot. Another message followed instantly in the same thread, aiming for the emotional jugular. Cole asked why Aunt Vivian hates him. How do you explain that to an 11-year-old? You're a monster. I set the phone face down on the counter. Luna walked in moments later, still in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep, but her eyes were clear. She saw my face and stopped instantly. Is it them? She asked quietly. I nodded. She climbed onto the stool beside me, pulled the phone over, and started scrolling through the notifications with a calm curiosity only kids can manage when faced with overwhelming adult absurdity. Another FaceTime from Eleanor popped up. Luna watched it ring out, her face expressionless. Sierra called again, then Jason, then Eleanor again. Luna looked up at me, her eyes wide, but steady. They're really mad, huh? I managed a small, strained laugh. Yeah, really mad. She kept scrolling, then stopped on Bridget's last message, the one about Cole. Her face changed. Something hardened behind her eyes. A definite flicker of recognition that Bridget was still trying to manipulate the situation, even using Cole as a shield. She put the phone down, reached over, and placed her small hand on my shoulder. Mom, she said, her voice soft but sure. You did the right thing. I stared at her. It was the first time she had ever validated such a major, destructive choice. Not, are you sure? Not, will they forgive us? Just those 6 words. Spoken with the conviction of someone who already understood more about self, worth, and boundaries than most adults I knew. My eyes filled so fast I couldn't stop them. She climbed into my lap like she used to when she was little, wrapped her arms around my neck, and let me cry into her hair, while the phone kept buzzing against the counter like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. When I could breathe again, I whispered, "Thank you, baby." She pulled back just enough to look at me, her own wet eyes half smiling. "I'm not a baby anymore," she said. "And I'm not sorry we left." The phone rang again, Jason, this time, his 10th call in 20 minutes. Luna reached over and pressed decline, without hesitation. Then she turned off the ringer completely. The sudden, profound silence felt like the first real peace we had enjoyed in weeks. We sat there together at the kitchen island, the coffee going cold. The notifications finally muted, while the rest of the family screamed into a void that no longer included us. Wednesday afternoon. The doorbell rang non-stop. I was at the kitchen island, finalizing payroll for one of my own small portfolio companies. When the first burst came, 3 sharp rings, a pause, 3 more, then a long, continuous press. I already knew who it was. I walked to the front door and opened it, just wide enough to see without inviting them inside. Jason and Sierra stood on my porch, looking like they had been dragged through hell. Jason's shirt was untucked and wrinkled, his eyes red, rimmed, stubble covering his jaw. Sierra's hair was in a messy knot, her mascara smudged into dark circles. There was no trace of her usual designer armor. Jason tried to step forward, but I didn't budge. "Vivian," he rasped, his voice raw and pathetic. "We need to talk, please." Sierra's hands were clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. 5 minutes. That's all. I kept my hand on the door, leaning slightly against it. "Luna is doing homework 10 feet away." Jason swallowed hard. "We know. We're desperate." Sierra's voice cracked. "The company is gone. Investors pulled out within hours. Employees are already leaving. We are going to lose the house. Cole's school, everything." Jason's eyes filled with tears. "We're on the edge of bankruptcy. Please, call James. Tell him it was a family fight that got out of hand. Tell him anything." Sierra nodded fast. "We'll sign whatever you want. We'll say whatever you need us to say. Just save the company." I studied them for a long, silent moment. They were begging for $5 million. Neither had asked how Luna was. Neither had even said her name once. I spoke quietly. "Where is your apology to my daughter?" Sierra blinked, confusion instantly replacing desperation. "What?" "You heard me," I said. "You came to my door begging for $5 million. But neither of you has asked about my 12-year-old daughter, Luna. Sitting in the next room, who cried herself to sleep because her uncle told her she wasn't important enough to attend his son's graduation party." Jason opened his mouth, closed it, and opened it again. Nothing came out. Sierra tried to recover. "Vivian, this is bigger than that. This is financial ruin." "No," I cut in, "it's exactly that small. It's about a little girl who learned from her own family that she ranks dead last." Jason's knees buckled. He dropped right there on my welcome mat, his hands clasped, tears spilling. "I'm begging you," he whispered. "For Cole. For our family. Save us." Sierra knelt beside him, sobbing openly. "We will lose everything we've worked for. Please." I looked down at my brother on his knees on my porch, crying like a child, and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Just quiet certainty. I leaned forward just enough for them to hear. Cole's future is not my daughter's responsibility, I said, my voice calm and cold. And neither is yours. Jason looked up, his eyes wild. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life. I stepped back inside. Jason tried to stand. Wait. I closed the door softly, calmly. No slam. Just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. Through the peephole. I watched them stay there for another full minute. Jason still on his knees. Sierra clutching his shoulders, both crying into the afternoon sun. Then they walked back to their car, got in, and drove away. I turned the deadbolt. I blocked every phone number that belonged to them. I removed them from every family chat, every shared album, and every emergency contact list. I changed the gate code. From that day forward, Jason and Sierra ceased to exist in our world. 8 months later, everything had changed. Jason's startup officially filed Chapter 7 in February. The big house in the gated community went into foreclosure 3 weeks later. Cole switched from private school to the local public middle school. The monthly family dinners stopped existing. Eleanor tried to organize one in April, then again in June, but no one showed up except Bridget. Eleanor still called every few weeks. I let most go to voicemail. When I did pick up, the conversations were short, polite, and empty. She never mentioned Jason or Sierra by name. She just asked about the weather and Luna's grades. Then hung up like she was afraid to say the wrong thing. Bridget sent one last venomous text on Cole's 12th birthday, blaming me for him not getting the gaming laptop he wanted. I blocked her number that same day. My father never called at all. Luna grew 3 inches over the summer. She made the honor roll, joined the debate team, and started volunteering at the animal shelter on Saturdays. She never once asked about her uncle, her aunt, or her cousin. Their names simply stopped coming up. One October evening, we were eating takeout on the back patio when she looked up from her phone and said completely out of the blue, "I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." I set my fork down. Pretend what? That they actually cared, she said. It's easier when people show you who they are. You don't waste time hoping they'll change. I stared at her. 13 years old, and already wiser than half the adults I knew. You okay with how everything turned out? I asked. She shrugged, took a bite of fried rice, and answered with her mouth half full. I have you. That's enough family for me. I felt my eyes sting, but I smiled anyway. Later that night, I walked past her room and saw her pinning a new photo to the corkboard above her desk. Me and her at the water park from the day of the party. Both sunburned and laughing, arms around each other. No one else was in the picture, and that was perfectly fine. I never heard from Jason or Sierra again. Not a text, not an email. Not even a holiday card with Cole's school photo. They vanished from our lives as completely as if they'd never existed. Some people think I went too far. Some people think I should have found a way to forgive. I don't lose sleep over it. I sleep just fine knowing my daughter will never again sit at a table where people laugh while she cries. I sleep just fine knowing she's growing up understanding that love isn't just a word people throw around when they want something. And I sleep just fine knowing that some doors have to slam shut forever so the right ones can finally open. Luna is happy. She is strong. She knows her worth, and that is worth more than any $5 million any family dinner, or any fake apology that never came. I never regretted a single second of choosing her.